Hello, Mark Capola here with another edition of Valhalla's Superhero Academy podcast. And this week, yet again, we have an awesome guest. But before I get to him and before I get to their organization, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about something that we've got brewing and something that's, really growing here at Valhalla. And that is Valhalla Montreal. Through also our agency that we, are marketing, we kind of launched our new website called valhallamontreal.com. And we, at the same time, launched Valhalla Movement over again, where now people like you can come and submit articles and post literally on our site. You can upvote. We're going to integrate a little bit of a downvote probably too, so that things can fluctuate a little bit. You can submit articles, podcasts, videos, pictures, you name it, whatever you feel is around the web and that people should see. You can literally get that on our homepage on your own now. But what I wanted to kind of point towards is also the fact that we, at Valhalla Montreal, take a lot of on-the-ground action. And we've got a lot of interesting events coming your way this year where you guys can take action. You guys can start your gardens. You can learn how to compost. You can just learn so many different things that we're going to be talking about this year throughout the year. Every single Saturday, we always have open days for volunteering. So I just want to kind of let you guys know that you guys can take action, not only with the guests that we have on today, but you also can take action with us here in Montreal or around the world. So look, we answer every single email. We answer every single Facebook message that we possibly can. Sometimes some slip through the cracks, but we want this to be a participatory thing, and that's why our new websites are reflecting some of that. And, we're trying to do more to launch these events out into the world. So without any further ado, I want to introduce a very special guest who works with AmazonWatch.org. And his name is Adam Zuckerman. And he is basically a campaigner making sure that we're going to protect the very valuable Amazon rainforests of our world, and basically a valuable resource, not only to the Amazon, not only to the people who live in these areas, but literally to the entire planet. And this is something we should all be concerned about. This is something we should all be thinking about more. And this is something that for me, last February, I was in the Amazon. I was like there. And when you're there and when you see it, and when you see its stunning beauty, and then you recognize that this resource, I don't even want to call it resource, this natural beauty is being absolutely destroyed left, right, and center. This is a problem. And people like Adam are out there in the world doing something about it. And they're having a lot of success, and they're making some noise. And it's pretty interesting to see what's going on. So for those of you who are listening, any links that we mention are going to be in the description below. And thank you so much, Adam, for being a guest on the podcast today.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me, Mark. And first of all, I want to give a shout out to everything that Valhalla is doing. I think that we're sort of one side of the equation, that we're trying to protect the Amazon, and we're working with indigenous peoples who are creating solutions. But I think in order to make that possible, you need to have people in the global north who are also pushing for a more sustainable lifestyle, who are sort of in their own lives incorporating a lot of these principles. So kudos to Valhalla and everyone who's doing that in their lives. Sort of, first of all, you as leaders. And yeah, I'd be glad to, I guess, to start off. Amazon Watch is a nonprofit organization. We're founded back in 1996, so almost 20 years now. I just started there 2 years ago, but before that, I was living in the Amazon rainforest.
Wow, where's this?
This was in the Ecuadorian Amazon.
Okay, sweet. And so you were living there. Now all of a sudden you were exposed to something. Tell me the story. What's going on?
Yeah. So I ended up spending a couple of summers in Latin America, actually in Central America, in high school, and sort of just fell in love with it. And then
I see why.
Yeah, and ended up studying in Ecuador in college, working with indigenous peoples, mostly in the Sierra, not in the rainforest. But after I went back, I had the opportunity to work in the rainforest with indigenous communities around rainwater catchment systems.
Okay.
And I realized sort of that I didn't feel super comfortable doing traditional development work. I felt like that was, as a white man, as an outsider,
As the gringo in the mix.
yeah, totally, as the gringo, um, I didn't feel comfortable making decisions for indigenous communities, or saying like, this is what you should do. These are the projects you should implement in your communities. And I think that's one of the things that really drew me to Amazon Watch, because we're not a traditional development organization. We're a human rights organization that helps to amplify the voices of indigenous communities who are both protecting the rainforest and creating their own solutions.
Wow.
So a lot of the times there'll be companies or governments or financial institutions that are making a lot of decisions for indigenous peoples living in the Amazon, and they don't necessarily have that access to those levers of power.
Yeah.
So here at Amazon Watch, we sort of envision ourselves as both a bullhorn and translators on many levels to indigenous peoples and social movements throughout the Amazon basin.
Okay, and so, I mean, you guys have been existing for 20 or almost 20 years now, or whatever. So that means you have people in America doing some of the work over here, getting people to take action online, getting people to sign petitions, getting people to donate money, running human resources, all that stuff. And then you've got people over there working and directly communicating consistently with some of these indigenous tribes, looking to find ways so that when you guys receive some of this funds or some of this, anything that's coming your way, that you guys can empower these people who are literally on the ground, living there constantly, to take action, as opposed to just saying, oh, what we need is more trees, and then planting them in rows or something.
Exactly. So actually, one of my colleagues, I'm part of the Ecuador team here at Amazon Watch. So we run campaigns in Ecuador, Brazil, Colombia, and Peru.
Okay.
And in Ecuador, we're a 3-person team. We're pretty small. And one of my colleagues, I have 2 colleagues in Ecuador. I'm sort of the state-based colleague, working with international media and helping to run some of the outward-facing campaigns. And my colleague in Ecuador is Quechua, indigenous from the Amazon, speaks 6 languages.
Wow.
So very, very talented guy. And he'll sort of be the person who will often travel to community assemblies when communities are making decisions or issuing declarations. He'll also help them to work on alternatives, like where communities have started to speak about the idea of solar villages.
Okay.
Especially in the southern Ecuadorian Amazon, there are indigenous peoples who have been resisting oil for the last 25 years, haven't allowed oil companies into their territory. And sort of the couple areas in which they're forced to use it is one, on canoes, being able to get back and forth, because a lot of these communities have prohibited the construction of roads into their territory. Yes, which is
I
great.
Experienced when I was in Brazil. Right. When I went into the Amazon, I went literally 5 hours deep, like driving away from Manaus, which is already in the Amazon. I went 5 hours deep, like deeper, and I took it was like a taxi, then a boat, then like a van, and then from the van it was like a faster boat, and then a much smaller boat that kind of went down the smaller channels, and then finally we got to like a little kind of jungle lodge, and from there we went and camped in the rainforest, and we took the same rackety little boat all the way, 2-hour kind of boat ride, deeper and deeper and deeper, and we weren't even that far technically, you know what I mean? Like the indigenous were still even significantly further than that. I mean, they were in our area too, but there was others that were significantly further as well. So
totally, yeah. And I think resisting roads is one way that allows communities to sort of to decide what they want to adopt from Western culture.
Okay.
Sort of the more positive aspects, and what they don't want, because once roads come in, that becomes a lot more difficult.
So what do you think they do want? Because we hear a lot about what they don't want, right? They don't want deforestation. They don't want the oil to come out of the ground. They don't want, clear cutting to go down. They don't want poisoning of their waters. They don't want, obviously, to be killed or kind of set into some of these programs that are there to help them. So what are the things that they do are seemingly wanting to adopt from the Western world right now in your mind?
Totally. So it really depends on each community. But one example is the community of Sardayaku. They're called the Quichua of Sardayaku, and they're actually really interesting because they won a landmark court case against their own government at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which is the legal body of the Organization of American States, kind of like the United Nations for North, South, and Central America.
Okay.
And they actually first the government was using its military, the Ecuadorian government was using its military to facilitate the entry of oil companies into their territory, which later tortured some of the people in Sardayaku, planted tons of explosives in their territory.
Oh, God.
And Sardayaku had a sort of a 6-month period of resistance in which they were able to actually kick the oil company out of their territory, in which they went into hiding into the rainforest.
Wow.
And then they had this 8-year legal case that they eventually won, and it set this huge legal precedent that under international legal law right now, any company or government in the Americas that wants to operate in indigenous territory first needs the consent, the free, prior, informed consent of indigenous communities. So it was historic for setting that landmark, and now it's sort of it's now our role to make sure that's actually being enforced.
Yeah, which is two slightly different realities at times, correct? I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, yes, you have to convince the indigenous people, or this is like they just won this thing, or they won a whole lot of money, or whatever it is. But sometimes it's just a way of circumventing the real problem, or what's going to actually physically happen on the ground in the long run anyway, right?
Totally. I mean, actually, so one of the results of Sardayaku's victory was that the Ecuadorian government had an oil auction in which they were trying to auction off 10 million acres of the Ecuadorian Amazon to oil companies.
Oh my God.
It's really tragic because if you look at the northern Ecuadorian Amazon, almost all of that has been contaminated by Texaco, which is now owned by Chevron, and in later years by a state oil company, Petroecuador or Petroamazonas.
Wow.
But in the southern Ecuadorian Amazon, the tribes there have seen what's happened in the north. I mean, they've said, not here. So out of the 21 oil blocks that the government was trying to auction off, they went out of their way to exclude Sardayaku territory because they knew about their resistance and they knew about this legal precedent that they had just won. And the government, through that legal precedent, actually was forced to pay them over $1 million. And
which is like peanuts, really.
Which was not close to enough, but it was, I think, one of the first times that governments had ever actually had to apologize to indigenous communities.
Wow, that's amazing. So, why, like, it's funny because you're talking about it's like, okay, we're in the Amazon, we're protecting indigenous communities. What about the other people? Why indigenous communities? What exactly do you feel, and why does Amazon Watch feel, I guess, that the indigenous communities are the real people who need this support, and it's not other people in the area or the big cities that also need to be supported in this way?
Totally. That's a great question. I think if you look at it statistically, indigenous peoples' territory covers 80% of the world's biodiversity, and indigenous peoples make up 4% of the world's population.
Wow.
So there are a number of studies, one most recently coming from the World Resources Institute, that shows that indigenous peoples are the best protectors of the planet, and specifically of the most biodiverse areas. And I think that's especially true in the Amazon rainforest. Also, we do work with, for example, on Chevron, a lot of the people who were impacted were non-indigenous campesinos.
Okay.
So we definitely work with those communities as well, especially to get justice from Chevron. But they're not. I think indigenous peoples have a closer connection to the land. I think we all do at some point, and we all did. And I think as generations have passed,
they've
some of
maintained
us, Yeah, they've maintained it, and we've lost some of that. And I think that's some of what some of the movements like Valhalla are doing, are trying to regain that connection to the land, not seeing ourselves as something that's separate, but as one living being. And that when Pachamama, which is Quechua for Mother Earth, is damaged, we're also damaged.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we definitely forget. We definitely forget when you can go to the grocery store and everything's available to you. We definitely forget when we're at the gas station, we just pump in the gas and like it just works. We forget about a whole lot of stuff. I mean, we forget about everything. Well, I mean, we forget about our own stuff all the time, right? Like just misplacing things. So imagine trying to keep track of everything that's happening everywhere in the world and trying to know all of these different things. It's tough to do. So it seems like the best action to me is like to solve a problem wherever it is in the world is always to empower the people who are there to do that, right? So there's no doubt about the fact that the best people to take care of a problem in San Francisco is going to be people who live in San Francisco. The best problem to take care of, in Montreal is the people who live in Montreal, for the most part. And then obviously we're a global community to some degree too. We have to find ways to work together, and we have to be able to tackle some of these massive multinational corporations down in a way that makes this fight fair in a weird way. You know what I mean? Like, and this is not a fight this is a fight that's happening everywhere in the world right now. People are like, oh, with Amazon, like, okay, it's important, but really? And it's like, well, first of all, yes, it's very important. And there are surely tons of statistics I'm sure you can go into about that, and so can I, but it's clearly very important. But these are fights that are happening even here in Canada, for example, right? The Canadian tar sands, they want to make this big pipeline that they wanted the Keystone that, now got vetoed, which is, wow, lucky for us. But guess what? Now, because they vetoed it, the real truth is it's actually going to possibly affect Montreal now more, because they want to make an eastern pipeline that goes down towards kind of the eastern Canada. So
and
it's
bomb trains that are coming through.
Bomb trains, fracking. They're going after. They're polluting the groundwaters in whether it be Pennsylvania or literally across the U.S. at this point, and Canada. There are so much environmental degradation that is going on, and all of this is happening in the name of energy. Now, that's crazy to me. That's absolutely insane to me, because we have such amazing technologies. I mean, you mentioned solar villages. We have such amazing technologies, but we're not adopting them quickly. And I don't understand why people individually are not doing this. Like last year was the first year that Valhalla was able to buy solar panels. We got 8 solar panels that we set up, and we have another 7 that we got at a really good price that we ended up buying out of kind of our own pockets. And we're like moving towards this as fast as we possibly can. Not only because it's like a thing that we're doing now, where it's like, has nothing to do with branding or anything. Like, right. I mean, there's a part of that we consider, I guess, but more than that, it's just like, this is the direction that I personally and others at Valhalla obviously wanted to go in. And I want to see this happen like everywhere. I want to see this on every rooftop. I want to see like as much of this being adopted as possible. But I don't understand why people aren't doing it. And one of the crazy things that I've seen is the people who are fighting against the oil companies also have oil generators like in their backyard.
Right.
And I'm like, whoa, wait a second here. You're fighting the oil companies, but then you're powering your shit with the oil generator right behind you. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I can't believe that some of that stuff is still going on. But at the same time, I understand that they're probably in a predicament. They don't have the money to buy the solar panels. They don't have the knowing of how to set them up or whatever, and the resources to be able to like source them. And what they do have is the things that's being harvested right in their backyard, but they're still paying astronomical prices for, because everyone else is paying cheaper and they're still paying expensive. What's happening here? Like, how do we start tackling this a little bit more? And I can't expect that you're going to solve this problem in an hour-long podcast, but obviously, tell me a little bit more about like what you guys physically are kind of doing and how you guys are addressing this. Right.
So there are a lot of indigenous communities right now that are in that predicament, that are like, we've been resisting oil for 25, 30 years, and we don't want to be, and they do, I mean, getting back to your question about what indigenous communities do want, I mean, they do want electricity. In some cases, they do want internet to be able to sort of selectively choose what they take in, and also to be able to continue promoting their cause. One great example is actually from that same community of Sardiaku. There's a guy named Heriberto Gualinga, who is a young indigenous filmmaker, and we actually gave him a MacBook Pro and sort of taught him how to use some of the editing software. And he now is this internationally renowned filmmaker.
Wow.
He made a film called Children of the Jaguar, which is a short 28-minute film that I'd encourage everyone to check out. It's
Links
about
in the description.
Yeah, in the description. It's his story from his perspective about his community struggle and their eventual victory at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights.
Wow.
And he's gone on that ran on National Geographic, which is really an amazing dynamic because historically, going back to the 1800s, National Geographic sort of had a patronizing view of indigenous peoples, and I think they've gotten a lot better since then and are now one of the best sources. But it's this amazing shift of the dichotomy to see indigenous peoples profiling themselves in National Geographic, which I think is great. And he's gone on to make other films that have gotten increasingly better. The most recent one being about that Sardiaku is looking to create a border around its territory of flowered trees.
Okay.
So that everyone who flies above knows that it's an oil-free territory.
That's amazing. The first thing, when you first said border around their territory, I was just like, and then you're like, a flowered trees. Now you're talking. That's awesome. So basically the idea is like you'll fly over, you'd see like devastation all around, basically in different areas, unfortunately, and then in this one area that that they're holding out real strong, they'd be protected and kind of maintained properly, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're hoping that the community surrounding them also will be able to do that. But they're saying, we're making the decision right now that oil is never going to come into this territory. So I think it's a project that is going to take 20 or 25 years.
Wow.
Because their territory is huge. It's hundreds of thousands of acres. And you have to walk out into areas where there are poisonous snakes and walk for a couple days at a time in order to be able to do it.
You can imagine, and then by the time you get there, you have you have to plant all these crazy things. Like it would be very, very, very intense to do, but it would be awesome.
Yeah. So to get back to that, they're just indigenous communities are using media or using social media to be able to speak about their stories from their own perspective. I mean, they want electricity. Some communities are somewhat integrated into the capitalist system, so that there are communities who are living in voluntary isolation that have nothing to do with the outside world, but there are communities who want alternatives to the kind of money that oil companies are offering them. And so they're looking at their own, whether it's sustainable ecotourism or it's sustainable fishing projects. There are communities that have created their own really complex systems and their own complex proposals about how they want to live their lives and how they want to generate income within, and while still maintaining their way of life and the rainforest.
Because obviously part of this, when you were outside of the system, is that you weren't thinking so much about income as you were thinking about like living, right? Just like finding your food, taking care of your family, being in good health. Obviously, you'd want things like whether you want a shamanic doctor or you want just a traditional kind of doctor. I mean, they needed to worry about those kind of things, their shelter and all that kind of stuff. They didn't necessarily think about, I need money for this or I need money for that. And as the world kind of creeps into more and more of these spaces, it seems like they have to think about it more. Right. And
Totally.
and there's also more appeal to certain things, too. Right. Like, obviously, electricity has made life easier for the most of us. And so they would be like, OK, well, yeah, that would be easier for us, too. But then the question becomes, well, how do I get that electricity?
Right.
I'm going to run wires all the way from the power plant in the nearest city, or are we going to find ways to like get it in a more renewable way? Is there going to be this kind of information brought to us? And then The thing is that when the further out the community, obviously, probably the less traditional of an education system that they have. So they have very good, I'll call them jungle smarts as opposed to street smarts, but they maybe have less academic smart in terms of being able to access these kind of technologies, right? Like, I mean, you guys gave a MacBook and a camera to somebody who was living in one of these communities, and then all of a sudden, boom, goes out into the world and makes amazing film. Not every single person is going to like kind of intuitively get that kind of stuff, and not to say that they're uneducated or that these are not wild people necessarily either, right? Okay, they understand what is going on in the world to some degree. It's just that they're kind of left out of the conversation. They're almost like an invisible community because they're just not loud. They're just not numerous online, right? 4% of the world is 4% of the world is indigenous. That's around the world. That's not a lot of people. And it's particularly in some of these remote areas of some random part of the rainforest or the Amazon jungle. I mean, no doubt that they're not going to have the same impact and be able to get our attention in the same way that I don't know, Kanye West going up on stage again is going to do that, right? And it sucks. It fucking sucks. It really sucks that we pay attention to Kanye being an asshole compared to what's Chevron being an asshole, really.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that so there's some indigenous leaders who have gone on to get college degrees, or in some cases even masters and PhDs, and then I actually spoke with someone the other day named Hugo Lusitante. He's from the Cofan community in northern Ecuador, and his community actually moved further inland, further into the rainforest near the border with Peru, to escape from some of the contamination that Chevron had created.
Wow.
In their territory. And he's gone on. He's actually pretty famous now, and he's been featured in this recent documentary, and is sort of speaking about. It's really interesting because he moved to the States when he was 10 years old, and started going to school here, and so I think there's a lot of pressure on him to bring back the good, to get educated, to be a voice for his community. And there are a number of people like that. I have a friend, Nina Golinga in Sarayaku, who is half from, her mother is from Sarayaku and her father is from Sweden. So people who sort of border both worlds, I think oftentimes are able to be the best spokespeople for their people.
Wow. So I've heard these kind of stories before too. I went down to, I ended up going down to Ushuaia, the southern tip of Argentina, on my journey to South America. And I was there for a month. We were building an earthship with Michael Reynolds and the earthship crew there. Nice. There was numerous indigenous tribes that were kind of, big oil companies were basically fucking with them. Yeah. But they needed and the other thing, what they were facing a lot of also was like water shortages. They were literally getting large corporations like Nestle or whatever were coming up and buying water rights, and then all the land near the water so that they couldn't get water anymore. They couldn't access water, and they cut off some of the water supplies. So these people are literally like dying of thirst in a weird way, not in a weird way, in a shitty way. And then all of a sudden, this problem was coming, and then so they were lucky enough to kind of come down further south and learn about how airships work and start finding different opportunities. But they had already lost that fight. I want to hear a little bit more about how you guys are helping win the fight. I mean, I know you guys had some pretty big victories recently and some pretty big, stuff. Dive into that a little bit, and then let's dive into how bad this is, right? Let's dive into that whole tribe of people, that person that you mentioned. I can't remember his name, but he had to move because of how bad the pollution was. Let's dive into this because I don't think people fully understand how bad some of these scenarios could possibly be at times.
Sure. So I'll just touch briefly on a few recent victories.
Yeah.
So just a few weeks ago, actually, there've been rumors about it for a few months, but the Colombian state oil company Ecopetrol announced that it was moving out of UWA territory,
Okay.
that it was, or rather, that it was no longer pursuing the Magallanes gas project.
Okay.
So it had been trying to build this huge gas pipeline through the middle of the territory of the UWA, indigenous peoples in Colombia who we've worked with for a number of years. We first worked with them around Oxy, kicking Occidental Petroleum out of their land, which was this huge landmark victory back in the last decade, sort of before I started working on these issues.
Sure.
And they actually, what happened was that Ecopetrol was looking to come in to repair a pipeline that had been destroyed by the guerrilla in Colombia.
Okay.
And the UWA said, we're not taking any side in this fight. We're not with the guerrilla. We're not with the government and paramilitaries. We're saying that this is our territory and no one is going to come in.
And fuck you. Basically, essentially.
Essentially.
You're not coming in here. You're not doing that shit. And they were able to do that.
And they're able to do that. And now the government's saying they're no longer pursuing this new pipeline.
Wow.
And this new gas project.
That's amazing. So tell me another one. Where else have you guys had massive victories? At one point, one of our buddies who you met, Lawrence, mentioned something about $20 billion or something. What happened there?
Yeah. So that was actually Chevron. We've campaigned around Chevron for the last 13, 14 years.
Wow.
So the backstory to that is that, or first I'll get into some of the other victories, because I could go on for Chevron for a long time.
Yeah, go for it.
But at the end of 2012, Talisman, a Canadian oil company based in Calgary, decided that it was withdrawing from Achuar territory in the northern Peruvian Amazon. And that was after a 4 or 5 year campaign in which we had worked with the Achuar, accompanied them to every Talisman shareholder meeting.
Nice.
And connected a lot, actually, with First Nations communities in Canada who are battling the tar sands. So they got to go up to Alberta and visit Fort Chip and some of the communities that have been most gravely impacted by the tar sands.
Which is devastating.
Yeah, it's really tragic. And we've been sort of for several years now have been doing north-south solidarity work, in part because helping indigenous peoples to be able to have that conversation around their territories, around preserving their way of life. And another part of it is that we believe that there's certain parts that should be totally off limits to oil drilling, that new exploration in the Amazon, that the tar sands, that the Arctic, we shouldn't even be looking there. Right now. And
unfortunately, we're looking in all of them.
Right. Shell is trying to, or until recently, was still trying to drill in the Arctic. And there's a huge war going on for that, for those who people don't know. This is not something we hear about every day, but Canada, Russia, even the United States, and I think even China is involved in this. There's numerous countries that are fighting for how much of the North do they own, and Canada's trying to make the biggest claim because we're the furthest north, and then it's no, Russia sent a submarine and they put a flag down, and there's some serious resources there that people want, and this is serious. This is growing more and more and more. But anyway, continue. Totally. No, but it's especially tragic because the IPCC, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is saying that we need to keep 2/3 of fossil fuels in the ground, that of the reserves that we've currently found. And there are still governments and companies that are spending hundreds of billions of dollars every year looking for new reserves when we already have far more than we can possibly burn and still have life on our planet. So it's this predicament that fossil fuel companies' profits or their shareholder earnings are based on their reserves. And right now, there's an estimate that as a whole, the oil industry is worth around $20 billion, or rather $20 trillion.
I was about to say 20 billion does not sound like enough, but yeah.
20 trillion with a T.
Jesus.
It's a lot. So it's the richest industry in the history of the planet. And there was a great article in Slate magazine saying that the last time that an industry that wealthy was forced to give up its capital was over the Civil War in the United States.
Wow.
When slaveholders gave up, were the bloodiest war in the history of the U.S. when they were forced to go. So I'm not saying that oil is akin to slavery, because it's not. It's
enslaving us all to some degree, but yeah, it's. I mean, I get what you're trying to defend yourself against. Yes, you're not saying oil is akin to slavery, but it is the last time that shit went down, and it's probably likely to be a very disruptive time and period. If I can't imagine that the oil companies are not going to go down swinging. Is all I can say.
Yeah, and I was wrong. That article was actually, I believe, in The Nation.
Okay, sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's this huge vested interest, and we're still, while these oil companies are spending money on exploring for unburnable carbon, assets that they can't possibly use if we want to continue surviving, we're subsidizing them to the tune of billions and billions of dollars every year in order to do that.
Wow.
Public money essentially funding our own destruction. Which is
funding our economy, Adam. We're not funding our destruction. We're funding our economy, and it's very important to create jobs in America or in Canada or in the Amazon or wherever the hell we are. But it's fucking bullshit, because it barely is going to create any jobs, right? They're talking about this pipeline is eventually it's going to create jobs to build the pipeline, but once the pipeline's built, it's going to create like 50 jobs. It's like 50 fucking jobs for billions of dollars of stuff, and we're going to create 50 jobs, and that's what we're talking about jobs with. You know how many jobs it would create if we put solar panels on everyone's fucking roof right now?
Yeah.
You know how many thousands upon thousands of jobs? I wish I remembered the statistic right now. I wish I remembered it. But it's like hundreds of thousands of jobs would be created if we were going green. And if we were like rebuilding infrastructure across the all of the first world countries, with all the crumbling bridges and overpasses and stuff that we have. I mean, there's so much work to be done, and we're focusing on constantly growing these things as opposed to even maintaining what we already have. It's like, even in marketing, people fuck this shit up, right? Like, we have sometimes, like, we're all, so many people are focused on, like, getting new subscribers, new people, that they stop catering to the existing people that they already have in these organizations and who are already followers and dedicated kind of listeners or readers or whatever. And then you start losing the voice. You start getting away from what you did originally, what made you great in the first place. So it's like, we need to kind of maintain that. We need to kind of make sure that we don't forget about this kind of stuff, and not buy into the fact that there are jobs going to be created for this. The only economic opportunity or the only jobs that are going to be created out of this is going to be in cleanups. God damn it. It's going to be in, like, every time they fuck up, we're going to have to find a way to clean this shit up. And there was more jobs created, cleaning up the oil spill, the BP oil spill, compared to the number of people who were working at fucking BP for that fucking, getting that oil out of the fucking ground in the first place, okay?
Exactly.
So guess what? And now that BP oil is on all your shrimp and all your shit right now. Like, it's not fun. It's super not cool. And we're destroying so much of, like, anyway, I'm just gonna digress.
No. You're right on point.
Yeah,
I wanted to add a glimmer of hope into that. Actually.
Yeah. Let's tell me about this victory, because
but just first on solar, one statistic that's really really exciting. Well, I think living in California, also in the Bay Area, there's been a huge boom in solar here.
Okay.
And actually, I believe in the United States, even with the huge amount of fracking and sort of the oil boom that's happened throughout the United States, to the point where it's actually has been the main cause for driving down global oil prices, because there's just been too much production. We've actually added more solar jobs in the past year than we have oil jobs.
Wow.
Which is exciting. And I think that
even already there, sun representing like a super small fraction of where we're getting our energy from. Okay, coal ash is a huge problem that Vice just cracked recently. They're not the first person to crack it, but they just took another stab at it. There's so many other jobs that are being created, other oil energy sources, but they're all so awful. And then here we are, boom, solar is taking over already.
And I think if we got rid of some of these subsidies and actually had a carbon tax that incentivized things like solar, then we would be able to reach the point where we were no longer depending upon oil. I think it requires the political will, but I think some of the victories just that are happening in the Amazon are helping to create that. Talisman, this Canadian-based oil company, they actually decided that they were moving out of the Peruvian Amazon after the 4 years in which we had these exchanges with First Nations coming down to the Peruvian Amazon, people going to their shareholder meetings, and we created this really strong coalition in Calgary mainly of Canadian folks who were saying, not in my name. I don't want Talisman creating this destruction in my name, which was real. And ConocoPhillips, another oil company, did the same thing around the same time, which was really powerful.
Okay, so let's go to Chevron, because I think that seems to be the one that you're personally involved in Ecuador as well, correct?
Totally. Actually, Chevron they named me in a defamation suit. Because
that's not fun.
But to back up a little bit, Texaco, which was acquired by Chevron in 2001, was spent over 20 years devastating the Ecuadorian Amazon. They spilled 18 billion gallons of toxic wastewater and crude into open pits and directly into rivers in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon. There were 2 communities living in voluntary isolation that were there before Texaco came in, and now they're extinct. They no longer exist.
Oh my God.
So Texaco, at the time, it was really the first operator, the first oil operator in Ecuador, starting in the 1960s, and there were regulations on what oil companies should be doing in the United States. But Texaco said, we're really the first ones to be operating here. There are no regulations, so we'll just do whatever the fuck we want.
Oh, fuck me.
So they would actually use crude, just spilling it on dirt roads to keep down the dust. They would tell...
No way.
Yeah.
They would literally just throw oil on the road so that the dust, when they would drive in and out of that area, would not like kind of kick up or whatever.
Right. There's actually video of it.
Oh my God.
And they would tell indigenous peoples and campesinos living in the area that, this oil is good for you. You should put it on your body. It heals this, that, and the other. And, these people in the beginning believed them because it's the first time they've seen oil.
Yeah, and I mean, these guys are coming in with massive technology and like electricity and stuff, and these guys are, some of these indigenous people are not necessarily exposed to this kind of stuff, so of course they're going to believe these, amazing, like this very powerful organization coming into their lands, kind of thing, right?
Totally, and I mean, Texaco deliberately poisoned these people because it could have spent $3 more per barrel to line the open waste pits into which they were dumping the oil, and they decided not to. They decided to have them unlined so that they would seep directly into the groundwater, poisoning the water of these people for decades. There have been 1,400 cancer deaths in that area that have been linked to...
And is that that must be statistically significant as well, right? Like it's 14,000 would have, let's say they would have had 1,000 normally, but now they had 14,000 as well.
Oh, sorry, yeah, 1,400.
1,400, sorry.
And those have been... So their statistics is showing for a lot of the types of cancer, I can't remember the types off the top of my head, but they're 5 times as many, 30 times as many as you would see in other areas.
Wow. So without a doubt, to blame is Texaco in that scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, so
definitely.
now that this is happening, shit's going down, unfortunately. Let's fast forward a little bit and get to, okay, what's been going down since then?
So in 1993, there was a case that was started by Ecuadorian lawyers and 30,000 plaintiffs, Ecuadorian plaintiffs. And they tried to sue, because Texaco is based in the United States, they tried to sue them in New York.
Okay.
And Texaco spent 8 years essentially saying, you have no jurisdiction here. We're going to get the case. We're going to throw it out of New York court. And they signed 14 affidavits saying how amazing the Ecuadorian legal system was and how glad they would be to abide by any decision that came out of the Ecuadorian courts. So there was a new case that was started in Ecuador, starting in 2003.
Okay.
Once Chevron had already acquired Texaco, and we gave before they acquired Texaco, we went to their annual board meeting, and we gave them tons of pages of essentially the liability that they were voting to acquire. They still went forward and did it. And one of the major reasons why they've been so resistant, why they've been so stubborn in terms of having any accountability around this disaster, is because their CEO, John Watson, is the same person who was the head of mergers and acquisitions when they made this deal. So if he admits to that, I fucked up, I shouldn't have acquired these liabilities,
He'd also lose his job right then and there.
Right. I mean, I don't know if he'd lose his job, but he's admitting to a huge fuck up that's costing the company right now a $9 billion liability.
Wow.
So the Ecuadorians ended up winning. And just to make it
When
clear,
was this? When did they win?
So they won at the end of 2010, beginning of 2011.
Yeah.
And they won, at the time, it was first a $9.5 billion hearing. And then the judge said, actually, if you don't apologize within 15 days, we're going to double that amount. So that's what happened. The Ecuadorian Supreme Court.
They didn't apologize and they doubled the amount?
They didn't apologize.
That is hilarious. Oh my God. Okay.
So
it's not hilarious, but it's hilarious, at least in that, whatever. But yeah, okay.
So the Ecuadorian Supreme Court later said they've had a number of times they've affirmed this decision.
Okay.
And in the last one, in the Supreme Court hearing, they said, we're actually not allowed to require you to pay double for not apologizing, but you are still required to pay, I think it's $9.5 billion.
Wow.
Which would be
to those 30,000 original plaintiffs, or something, like whoever the new plaintiffs were, basically in that case, that was restarted in Ecuador in 2003.
Exactly, yeah. To those, so I believe it's many of the same plaintiffs from the original case, and I think there were some that later joined onto the case.
Okay, so what happens if I didn't join onto the case, but I'm one of the guys in the towns who everyone else is in the case? Am I getting is it individual money? It's to people?
I'm actually not sure about that. I believe that right now there are sort of community organizations that are creating the infrastructure to be able to absorb the kinds of funds that would come in to do, first of all, to do a real cleanup, to do clean water drinking systems. And the truth is no amount of money is going to be able to remediate. Yeah,
I was about to say, is this possible? What is cleanups really a thing? I know we're able to kind of clean up some stuff, but I mean, this is years later. I mean, how much cleanup could you possibly do? I mean, it seems like a lot of the damage is already done, no?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is there, and there are good organizations. There's an organization that we partner with called Clearwater.
Yeah.
You can go to their website, giveclearwater.org, and they're a community-based organization in which peoples impacted by Texaco, now Chevron's contamination, are creating clean water catchment systems, essentially not waiting on Chevron to clean up its mess,
because it won't.
Yeah, because I mean they've been suffering for years, and I mean our hope and our fervent belief is that Chevron will do the right thing and that they will clean up its mess. But in the meantime, these communities need clean drinking water.
Wow.
And we're not going to say you should be pawns in this case, that you should continue suffering because it makes the judgment more necessary.
So I kind of can't help but feel like it seems like this is just regular business for Chevron. Like, this is a huge win. Like, that's awesome, right? $9.5 billion is insane. And to kind of have that kind of victory and have any victory at all in court versus some of these massive oil companies is pretty impressive, just to begin with. And I admire their persistence in having done it, over whatever, since 1993. I mean, Jesus, that takes time. That being said, it's like, is this not just like a way of like Chevron saying, okay, it's like a cost of business? It's like, they went into an area, they pulled out some oil, they made some damage. It's, let's say now they have to pay $9.5 billion, but they pulled $100 billion out of the ground. It seems like, it's not that so bad math, I mean, there's other costs obviously, but it seems like they'll still be pretty profitable. Do you get the sense that that's kind of their game plan? Is this what's happening? Is this what's going to continue to happen is what I'm trying to say? Are they just going to continue to completely not give a fuck, throw it right into whatever river or stream or whatever it is of groundwater, and then just kind of say, oops, and then once they lose, eventually, if they lose, first of all, but once they lose, let's say, and hopefully they at least, that they just kind of pay the money and that's that?
Well, I think it's actually more fucked up than that. Chevron, if it's possible. Yeah. So Chevron actually left Ecuador around the same time that the trial started in 1993, 1994. So that the plaintiffs could not collect their assets.
Wow.
And so, although the Ecuadorians have won this huge $9.5 billion judgment, they're having trouble actually collecting that. So what the legal team has been doing has been to go to countries where Chevron does have assets, like Argentina, like Canada, and say, you have to. And asking those countries' courts to actually freeze and then seize their assets. So that's actually legal processing that's happening in Canada right now.
Yeah, they're going after Chevron in Canada.
Yeah, and there's an appeal that's happening right now because for some reason Chevron was able to successfully argue in the first case. They have this corporate veil argument in which they're saying that Chevron Canada is not part of Chevron. So,
oh my God, are you fucking serious? It's like they've got the same branding and everything, but fucking bullshit. Okay, so
right.
Chevron Canada is not part of Chevron the whole because it's Canada's version of Chevron.
Right. Oh, so almost all of Chevron's assets are in subsidiaries. Essentially,
of course. Yeah, so then you can't steal from the subsidiary because it's a legally thing. They're legal separate identities, you piece of fucking shit. I can't fucking, like, honestly, like, there's some things about law that are like, I love justice, right? My father's a lawyer. I kind of enjoy law to some degree. There's something about it that's pretty interesting and intriguing in my mind. But it is fucking horseshit sometimes. It is such bullshit. I can't even fathom that people waste 8 years saying, oh, no, you don't even have legal precedent here, or you have no blah, 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 and they say all sorts of fucking mumbo-jumbo bullshit, and then the judge has to decide, not based on fucking common sense, like, yeah, you guys fuck shit up, fuck you pay. He has to decide based on which fucking team of lawyers presented some legal loophole of some thing that was signed in 1840, that said this weird thing about like oil at one point that has this weird word in it that's misinterpreted like the Bible or something. And then all of a sudden that's the whole case is run based on that fucking little thing. Right. And then it's like, sorry. And it's like, oh, you won? No problem. Now try and collect the money from us. Like, now we're going to run away and hide. And I can't believe that this continues. I can't believe that this is something that we cannot just tear down. And I understand, okay, and I understand why people lose their shit. I understand why people like literally go up in arms and start like fighting physically these companies or these people, because I would fucking lose it. Think about your backyard, okay? We don't have much time left on this podcast, but I just want to kind of end on this note. think about your backyard. Imagine an oil company came in and just started digging a well there, and chances are they already are, okay? Whether it's an oil company or whether it be natural gas, whether it be coal ash, or whether it be all these things, there are pollutants in your water too. And even if there aren't pollutants, guess what? Every time you flush that toilet and that fresh water goes into guess where it goes? Right back to where you get your fresh water. So guess what? You yourself are polluting your own water all the time. But let's forget about that. Let's go stick to the oil companies. Imagine they come to your backyard, start drilling, and pollute your water, and you're drinking this. Imagine that scenario, and then imagine being able to literally chasing these people in the big game of cat and mouse around the world, almost like a, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego style, okay, where you're literally fucking running around trying to fucking catch these people, and then you win, and then they're like, oh, no, I mean, we moved all our assets, so how are you going to get this $9.5 million? Fuck you.
The worst part of it is that they've had this scorched earth legal strategy, and they're actually suing the indigenous peoples and the lawyers who beat them.
Oh, of course, individually. Right. And now they're going to take you all out individually and say your defamation, like you said. They're going to be like, yeah, you know what, Adam? Fuck you. We're going to you've been defaming Chevron, and everything you've been doing has been against Chevron, so now we're going to go after you. That's not cool.
And it's actually part of this strategy they have. They started a RICO case. They actually won a RICO case in the United States in New York, which is racketeering and corruption, the kind of thing that the FBI used to go after the mafia. So they're saying essentially there's this mob-like global conspiracy between indigenous peoples, their lawyers, and
oh my God,
any nonprofit who dares to stand up to Chevron. They've even named their own shareholders in it. They've tried to subpoena and sue their own shareholders.
What?
That's how fucked up they are. In order to just turn the tables, and it's not just about Chevron. For them, it's not just about. I think they see it as something much larger than these $9.5 billion. It's about indigenous peoples and campesino communities in general being able to hold multinational corporations accountable.
Of course.
So it's, every
and
other
that's what it
company
should be. We should be able to hold people accountable, or else what the fuck are we doing? Or else they're more powerful than our own governments. Our governments have more accountability than that. And that's saying a lot. That's crazy. And this is happening all the time. So I want to end on this note, which is basically, guys, we got to do something about this. And you can do something about this, okay? And I know it feels like this is super big and crazy, but there's like a small little team of people working in Ecuador, Amazon Watch, 3 people, and guess what? They're getting victories now. Are they chasing them around the world and all sorts of crazy shit's happening? Without a doubt, but guess what? Stuff's happening, and they're making it hard for Chevron to maneuver and to do these kind of things. And the more that we do that, the more time we allow for things like solar panels and stuff to come into the psyche and slowly but surely kind of make obsolete all of this bullshit in the first place. Because the only way we're ever going to win right now, the only way this is ever truthfully going to stop is that we come up with a better solution and an even more economically viable solution. I'd be more than happy if fucking Chevron was like, you know what, fuck it, we're closing all our oil drilling sites and we're going into fucking solar. I'd be like, okay, cool, fucking yes. I have no problem with them making money. I have no problem with Chevron. I'm not attacking anybody in particular. It's just about the mentality of constantly running away and not jumping into the future. Why can't they use that exact same technology, the amazing amounts of engineers and people that they have working at their company, okay, who are smart as individuals? Tons of them are fucking brilliant. They probably have some of the best lawyers that you can applaud ever, but why can't we use that?
2,000 of them who have worked on this case.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. They must have spent so much money. They literally probably spent more than like $9.5 billion anyway just defending against you guys, right? So it's like, it doesn't even, it's like, I can't just, guys, there are so much you can do. Go check out AmazonWatch.org. You can take action directly on their site. You can donate some money because it's worth it. Like, hey, there are people out there who really need your help. And, you can, like, for the price of whatever, okay, like as opposed to buying one other thing at the mall next week or one less Starbucks coffee, maybe you can donate part of that money to these kind of causes. And if you don't have money, it's fine. Donate your time. do something. Let's crowdsource solutions to this kind of stuff, and let's find ways to convince our parents or ourselves and install solar panels on our own houses. Let's do something in our own communities. It's not about going to the, being the gringo who has to go to the Amazon to be the guy who's going to save the world, because you're not going to be that guy, okay? Right. Or you might be, but statistically you won't. But what you can do is start adopting this kind of stuff now. If you stop using oil as much, if you start biking around a little bit more, if you start finding ways to kind of remove this kind of stuff out of your life and understanding where oil is too, which is not technically oil isn't anything that's being shipped pretty much, but also in different materials and stuff. Be aware. Let's open our eyes, goddammit. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I am not. I'm far from it, and I'll be the first to admit it. But at least I'm trying. Yeah. And I have to try, because I don't know what else I would fucking do, because every time I talk about this shit, it enrages me. I lose my shit every time. So please, guys, go and join some of these organizations. You don't have to start this on your own. People are like, oh, well, I don't know what I can do. It's like, join something, be a part of something, go woofing, or join Amazon Watch, or be a part of Valhalla, or start your own Valhalla. Do something, right? Yeah. Just do something. And if there's any final words or anything you want to say, I mean, sorry about that, but I had to go with it. But if there's anything you want to point to people to, or where they can get more information, where they can connect with you, what's the best thing for them to do?
So check out AmazonWatch.org, and there's a specific resource that there are actually a couple. One is you can check out Google Amazon Watch, Keep the Oil in the Ground.
Okay.
You'll see a 4-minute video. It has over 1.4 million views right now.
Whoa.
Of our partner who I was speaking of, Nina Golinga, speaking about her community and the need to keep the oil in the ground, and that links to a petition on our site. And also, I just created a list called the Slimy 17, the 17 oil companies who are doing the most damage to the Amazon. So you can encourage your school, your city, your state. Once Harper's no longer in power, perhaps even your country, maybe, to divest, or your place of worship. Yeah. So there's this huge fossil fuel divestment movement that's trying to challenge the power of these corporations who are using their money to pervert our politics.
So we're gonna make a blog. If you're up to it, we're gonna put a blog up with all these links, all these videos. Everything is gonna be in this blog. Everything we mentioned. Okay, we're gonna try and link to. We're gonna try and make this as in depth as possible. And we're gonna do everything possible, at least at Valhalla, to do what we can to move away from oil, to what we can to spread the awareness. And it's not just about awareness, guys, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just about clicking like anymore. We got to do something. It's always been like this. It's just getting worse. So, not to be a doomsdayer, I'm not. I'm very hopeful of all of this stuff. But, to all of you listening, you guys can do something. Wherever you are right now, you're on the bus, car, you're on your way to work, you're at work and you should be working. Well, guess what? Maybe take a little bit less time or spend a little less time working, continue not working, and go and figure out what you're going to do in your own life. Figure out what you're going to do to be a part of it and make a difference.
Totally. I just wanted to end on a quote from Patricia Golinga from that community of Sardayaku. So along with 100 other women, some of whom were 70 years old, others carrying babies on their backs, she marched over 200 miles from the Amazon to Ecuador's capital in Quito to speak at the National Assembly. And these are and it was to challenge the government's attempts to auction off her land to oil companies, to drill her land.
Wow.
So this is just a few words of what she said. She said, "As women, we're mothers, sisters, wives, daughters, and friends. We are very sensitive to feeling what happens around us. Women have a close relationship to the earth because everything we are comes from the earth's powers. This is important because they are currently making bad decisions that put humanity at risk. Brothers and sisters, we're calling out the world to join together for true change. Let's leave the oil beneath the ground. The Sardayaku indigenous people believe that instead of bringing development, the oil industry is destructive for indigenous society, non-indigenous society, the planet, and nature. It disrupts our indigenous worldview and destroys our ecosystems. That's why we vociferously fight so that oil is not extracted from our territories. If we continue preying on the earth under the banner of the oil economy, we put at risk both our lives and the lives of the planet. Mother Earth is so tired of so much abuse and ill treatment. Now is the time to put on the brakes and say, this is the limit. We can't continue this way.
Wow. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you very much, guys, everyone who's listening. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe. Every time you click some of those buttons, it does help, at least me, be able to kind of make sure that I can do this more, because I feel like, every time I do this, sometimes there's like, oh, my heart aches. But at the same time, I continue to do it so that you guys can get this knowledge. It encourages people like Amazon Watch as well to go and like, comment, subscribe, do that kind of stuff. And then once you're done all that stuff, go and do it in person too. All right? Thank you very much, guys, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, and don't forget to rate and leave a comment. Until next time, be the hero you've always dreamed of being.